Welcome. In today's video, we're going to talk about the difference between WordPress.com and Wordpress.org. It seems to be a point of confusion. It's something that I seem to be answering a lot of questions on. And I think we're going to try and clear up some of the confusion, or I'm going to try and be a bit clear about the various points of confusion. So we're going to talk about some points here. I'm using my PowerPoint program so that I don't have to actually type, but we can look at some words. So if we start with WordPress.com, WordPress.com is considered to be the free WordPress, although this is a misnomer in many cases because most people actually pay money to WordPress. And so as soon as they pay money, they feel that they have the non-free or the self-hosted WordPress, and that's not true. The basic URL for a WordPress.com site is your domain .wordpress.com. You may purchase a custom domain and get away from this, but the basic URL of your site or address of your site is going to have WordPress in it. Let's move on to the next slide. WordPress.com sites are fully backed up and updated. You don't need to do any of this. I do often suggest that you create backups of your own periodically, but ultimately you don't have to do it. It is considered to be a great program for beginners, again, because you don't have to babysit it all the time, and a lot of the security and the maintenance work is done for you. There aren't any outside plugins allowed, and again, we'll look at a WordPress.com site and it makes you think that you actually can put plugins in place. And again, a point of confusion. You have 3 gigabytes of storage, and that may seem like a lot, but honestly, if you want to think about the amount of storage that you have on your smartphone, 3 gigabytes isn't really all that much. And you have to pay if you go beyond that. Any site that has a fair amount of graphics or cover graphics, images, will fairly quickly use up that kind of space. You have to operate under WordPress's rules. Most people, when they open a WordPress.com site, click on agree without actually reading the rules. And then they don't really understand how they come afoul of WordPress. WordPress can, they don't always, but they can completely eliminate your site without any wording or without any warning if they feel that you have gone against the rules. In my experience, there is usually some sort of a warning, but there doesn't really have to be. So what are the rules you have to be concerned with? The first rule is the adult content or the pornography rule. Anybody that is reviewing erotica or has 18 plus content has been known to run into problems because the dividing line between erotica and pornography tends to be a fairly fine line in many people's minds. So that's one thing that you need to be aware of. The other one is WordPress doesn't really like what they call book, blog, tour blogs. So in other words, blogs that post content that is common to other sites, like happen as part of book, blog, tours. So they want blogs that have original content where they're seeing some creativity. You can get extra traffic from the WordPress network, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes when we actually look at a site. This is really, really handy when you're first starting out. You can get an approximate equivalency on a self-hosted WordPress site, but it is really nice to find friends easily when you start out with WordPress.com. Your site may display ads. I've had a lot of people say, well, I don't see the ads. And the reality is you don't see the ads when you're logged into your own site. It is only visitors to your site that see the ads. You can pay money to get rid of the ads or to block the ads. But again, this is paying money and it doesn't move you away from WordPress.com. It just has you paying money to WordPress.com. And as I put at the end here, may cost money. A lot of people pay money to WordPress.com for various functionalities, for a custom domain, to block the ads, for extra space, some extra functionality. There's a bunch of different things, but that still leaves you on WordPress.com. It doesn't move you to a different kind of WordPress just because you pay the money and it's no longer free per se. So WordPress.org, it is also known as self-hosted WordPress. It is considered to be a more advanced version of WordPress. You need to purchase domain and hosting. Your domain is whatever your business name or your author name or your blogger name is. The hosting needs to be purchased as well. There are good hosting companies, not so good hosting companies. So there is a certain amount of decision making that has to happen. This version of WordPress is considered to be less restrictive. You have the ability to control your content to a large degree. They're not going to object to certain things. And you also have the ability to have a custom design, put as many plugins as you want in place. And as I've put in this point here, you have a fair amount of flexibility in your themes and your plugins functionality. However, that also creates potential security problems or certainly information that you need to know. And if you don't know the information, you can run afoul of being hacked or some other incompatibility, which can crop up as a problem. You are responsible for backups and updates. Even if your hosting company says they do automatic backups and updates, you should still be responsible for an external backup. And you should be certainly responsible for monitoring the updates. Hosting companies generally only update the version of WordPress, so you'll have to deal with some of the other updates that come along. And your storage limits are set by your hosting company, so you can buy a larger package, for example, if you find that you have larger storage requirements. Generally speaking, the storage requirements are quite generous, though. So if we look at this last slide here, when you log into a WordPress.com site, you should always log in entering WordPress.com in your browser window. WordPress.com will leave you logged in, which is a positive thing and a negative thing depending on your point of view. It allows you to not have to worry about constantly logging into your site. However, it can create some confusion if you're trying to do various things like leave comments on somebody else's blog, and that's where I've seen problems before. If you log in to WordPress.org or a WordPress.org site, you should always log in using the yourdomain.com/wp-admin in the browser window. If I get rid of my PowerPoint thing, we can then look at this window and you'll see that I've entered the domain/wp-admin here, and it brings up the kind of classic login window that we're used to seeing. You simply enter your username, your password, and click on login. If in fact you forget your password or your username, you can reissue it. It's not that difficult and you don't need any help usually to do that. That's something you can do on your own. If we go backwards a second and we look at WordPress.com, this is the classic login window for WordPress.com. So I have entered WordPress.com and hit enter, and it's given me a little bit of an extra in the window. If I was going to log into my WordPress.com account, I would simply go to the upper right, click on sign in, and it would present me with a sign in window that is similar to what we just saw. Once we sign in to a WordPress.com account, this is what we see. So we are brought to usually the reader. And this is what I was talking about earlier that helps you find friends. So you'll notice I've been doing a fair amount of posting lately, and so it's listing posts that I have generated on the book blogger list as part of my identity. If I scroll far enough down, however, you'll see recommended posts. If you haven't been posting, these will be essentially right at the top of your window when you log in. This gives me ideas of other blogs to follow, and I can very easily follow them by clicking on the link here. This is the way friends can find you, that you can network quite easily with really not doing much effort at all. And we can tie into this functionality using what's called Jetpack on our WordPress.org blogs. So you'll see these posts here that I have done in the last couple of hours, actually, or 17 hours ago, some of them last evening. That site has Jetpack on it, and so it connects my WordPress.com identity with a WordPress.org site, allowing me to share the posts with anybody that's following me on WordPress.com. So it is a kind of handy functionality that we can have. If we go over to the left-hand side and look at my sites, it will, and I'm just going to click here on switch sites. I've got quite a few sites that are hooked up, and it'll allow me to choose. So I'm choosing the WordPress.com site that I have here that I actually play on. It doesn't really have any content on it. I'm going to direct your attention to the bottom where we have WordPress admin. Okay, this is one way of knowing that this is a WordPress.com entry point. If I go back up to the top, click on switch sites, and I bring up my business site, you'll notice if I get to the bottom here, there's no WP admin. So this isn't a WordPress.com site. However, I can come up here, click on add, and add a blog post to my .org site through this particular window. Many people do this, and because they do this, they get confused as to whether they have the .com version or the .org version. Makes it confusing. So let's look at another point of difference. If I click on the WordPress.com site that I have here, I'm going to click on the WP admin, and it brings me to the dashboard of the site. And at first glance, this dashboard looks just like the dashboard of a .org site. So if I click on this tab on the browser, this is the dashboard for my .org site. You'll see same color, little boxes here, black line down the left-hand side with menu entries. Back to the .com, same color scheme, little boxes, black line down the left-hand side. However, if you look at the .com, it will always have a store entry. If we go over to the .org site, no store. Okay, so that is the fastest way to tell whether you have a .com or a .org site. The .org has no store. The .com has a store. In terms of all of the rest of the entries, they are very similar. In actual fact, you have a plugins entry. I'm just going to click on that. Like on the .org, there's a plugin entry that I can click on. They look a bit different. So this is you're looking here at the .org. If I click here, you're looking at the .com. The plugins that are allowed on the .com site are all supplied by WordPress.com. So you'll notice that it's got Jetpack by WordPress right up at the top. And this fuels the vast majority of the functionality that exists on a .com site. However, you'll see that you can upgrade or pay them more money and get extra functionality. So some of the stuff that is wanted or desired by people, they can simply pay money to get it. So for example, this one is a custom design. If we go over to the WordPress.org site, all of the plugins are viewed in a list usually, and as you can see, they require updating, or you have the ability to update them. The difference with the plugins here is there's a button at the top that says Add New, and you can go and search for plugins that help you perform a different functionality on your site. So we're at the end. I hope that you now have a better understanding of how to log in to your .com site, your .org site, and what the differences are between the two. Just keep in mind that just because you pay money doesn't mean that you don't have the free WordPress or the WordPress.org version of WordPress. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me through the contact information in the description.